And I remember very clearly the time that she told me what her plan was. She told me that she felt that whatever is deep in a person's heart, is what's going to come out if they ever lost control due to something like Alzheimer's. And she said that she wanted whatever came from her, if this was going to be her fate, to be kind and loving and gentle and even a blessing to others. And those are her words, not mine. And so she spent the next 8 years preparing herself to get Alzheimer's, preparing her heart and mind and spirit to where she had an inner peace that would come out if this ever happened to her. And it's a bit of a spoiler alert. It worked.
Welcome to the Alz Authors Podcast. We're so glad you found us. We're the global community of authors writing about Alzheimer's and dementia from personal experience to light the way for others. I'm Mary Ann Shuko, a registered nurse, author, and dementia daughter.
And I'm Christy Byrne-Yates, a licensed educational psychologist, dementia daughter, Alz author, and coach focused on the sandwich generation. Please join us for bi-weekly episodes with our authors as we talk about their dementia journeys, sharing intimate details and painfully obtained knowledge to help others currently on that path.
We hope these stories offer you comfort and support as we strive to break the silence and stigma surrounding a dementia diagnosis.
May one of our authors speak to your experience.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Hi, I'm Jean Lee from Alz Authors. All the resources we offer at alzauthors.com, including this podcast, are brought to you free of charge, and our authors incur no expense for inclusion. Our management team is a dedicated group of passionate volunteers who earn no financial compensation. But to continue our mission to provide valuable resources to dementia caregivers, we need the support of listeners like you. If you'd like to support us, please make a donation at alzauthors.com/donate. We are a 501c3 organization. Remember, you are not alone.
Hi, and welcome to our replay of Books and Chit Chat, our book club between Alz Authors and Aging and Amazing. In this last book club, we spoke with Marc Alderdice, who shared with us his memoir, Don't Forget to Dance, a unique Alzheimer's journey from bizarre to blissful. In this book club, we're going to talk about something really different. We're going to hear from a male caregiver, a husband who cared for his wife, but we're going to hear about a different way Alzheimer's manifested. His wife, Mary, also displayed signs of dissociative identity disorder, which is pretty unique. We'll also hear about his wife, Mary's proactive approach to the possibility that she might end up with Alzheimer's or some form of dementia. She had a family history, she was concerned about that, and so she took lots of steps to really prepare herself spiritually and physically and emotionally for the possibility that she might end up with a dementia diagnosis. So I think you'll really enjoy this. You'll hear some unique perspectives and, well, stay tuned. Thanks.
Hello and welcome to Books and Chit Chat with Aging and Amazing, featuring Marc Alderdice and his memoir, Don't Forget to Dance, a unique Alzheimer's journey from bizarre to blissful. I'm Christy Byrne-Yates, a team member at Al's Authors, the global community of authors writing about Alzheimer's and dementia from personal experience to light the way for others. My co-host, Marianne Shuko, is visiting family, and we will see her at our next Books and Chit Chat. Marianne is a founder and manager at Al's Authors and the author of Blue Hydrangeas and Alzheimer's Love Story. I'd like to introduce some of the members of our team who are with us today. We're also joined by Malika Moore of Aging and Amazing. Aging and Amazing is our partner on this Books and Chit Chat, and it's a wonderful organization that values healthy aging and caregiving. One side of the organization focuses on care management, and the other side of the organization focuses on their signature online community. Within this online community, over 200 members from around the world share their stories, resources, and tips to help support caregivers and those who are aging. Check out their online community to learn more. We're all aging and amazing. We also have Vicki Tapia, a founder and manager at Al's Authors. Vicki is the author of Somebody Stole My Iron, as well as wonderful other books. This event is being recorded and will be posted in our YouTube channel and on our podcast, Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia. You can listen to the podcast on all the major podcast sites like Apple and Spotify. You'll find it on our website at alsauthors.com. And I think we're ready. Marc, welcome to Books and Chit Chat and Aging and Amazing and Al's Authors. We're so excited to have you here and to talk about your book, Don't Forget to Dance. And I'm just going to turn it right over to you right now and ask you to tell us a little bit about your journey and your book and kind of get us started.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Like you said, the title is Don't Forget to Dance, and I'll come back to how I came up with that title in a little while. But I'd like to focus initially on the subtitle, which, as you said, was a unique Alzheimer's journey from bizarre to blissful. And I want to state right off the bat that all Alzheimer's journeys are unique. No two are the same, with the way the symptoms present, the person who has Alzheimer's, all the loved ones and friends and so forth. Everyone is different. But I do really think that ours is truly unique in a few ways, and that's what I'll focus on as I tell about the story. My wife, Mary, was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's 14 and a half years ago now, at the age of 59. Some of her relatives had Alzheimer's, and she saw how they changed, and how they acted and what they said and so forth. And she knew that her chances of getting it were higher just from a genetic standpoint. And I remember very clearly the time that she told me what her plan was. She told me that she felt that whatever is deep in a person's heart, is what's going to come out if they ever lost control due to something like Alzheimer's. And she said that she wanted whatever came from her, if this was going to be her fate, to be kind and loving and gentle and even a blessing to others. And those are her words, not mine. And so she spent the next 8 years preparing herself to get Alzheimer's, preparing her heart and mind and spirit to where she had an inner peace that would come out if this ever happened to her. And it's a bit of a spoiler alert. It worked. But anyway, then the inevitable came, and the diagnosis was sad and even seemed devastating at the time, but it certainly wasn't unexpected. But she wasn't about to let it get her down, and she actually started doing new activities after she was diagnosed. And let me go back one second. The thing about the way Mary prepared herself, I think that's totally unique from everything I've heard. I've never heard of anyone else preparing themselves like that, especially for years in advance of anticipating to get Alzheimer's. So that's the first unique thing. But anyway, after she was diagnosed, she didn't want it to get her down any more than she had to. And she started doing new things. She started horse riding lessons. And she also started taking lessons in drumming and crocheting and pottery. And so she didn't want to let it run her life or run our life together. And I think and while that's probably not unique, the way she did it, I think it's out of the ordinary. Because I think from what I understand, the people I know and the people I've heard about, most people take the word just out. Most people want to continue living their normal life as best as they can for as long as they can without adding on a bunch of new things that they're going to have to learn. And so I think that was somewhat different from the normal. And she progressed over the next 2.5 years. And by the end of that 2.5 years, I was doing all the cooking and cleaning and other household duties. But we had a good life together. And she appreciated what I did. She told me thank you. She even said she liked my cooking.
That's amazing. That's great. She came right in there with that. So great.
We were doing well. And I think we could have gone on like that for a long time. But then she came down with some strange illness that lasted close to 2 weeks. And I took her to all sorts of doctors and no one could find anything wrong. And towards the end of that 2 weeks, she told me she felt something was coming on. She didn't know what it was, but it was going to be bad. And little did she know at the time how correct she was. Because shortly after that, she started having all sorts of irrational fears and delusions. For example, she would walk past some clothes on the floor, and she would think that someone would jump out from under there and snatch her. And she thought that children were being tortured behind her closet wall or in her closet wall. And I realized that virtually all, if not all, Alzheimer's patients have fears and delusions, and that's nothing uncommon. I do think that it's unusual the way hers came on so quickly and so severely right after that illness. But that's not all. At the same time, she developed dissociative identity disorder, or the older term is multiple personality disorder. And I remember distinctly the first time that I knew something was amiss. And I know you like to have people read out of the book if they want to.
Yes, please.
So I would want to read this one little episode about the first time this happened. So one Sunday morning, while I was standing in our bathroom vanity shaving, Mary walked up to me in quick, bouncy steps, full of energy. She was smiling, her eyes were wide open and bright, and there was a lot of expression in her face and voice. She said, "Hi," in a perky voice. "Hi," I smiled back, glad to see that she was feeling better, cheerfully, yet wondering what had changed. She asked, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm Marc," I replied, thinking she had just forgotten my name due to the Alzheimer's, not yet realizing something was significantly different. "Where do you live?" she asked. I said, "I live here in this house." And she said, "That's nice." Then there was a short pause while I was processing the exchange, after which I asked, "Where do you live?" And she said, "No, I'm just a little girl." And she scurried off giggling. I stood dumbfounded, not knowing what to think, except who was that and what just happened. I went downstairs shortly afterward, and she seemed to be her normal Alzheimer's self again. So this little girl, who seemed to be about 5 years old, was the first of these identities to come out, and also the one that came out the most often, and the one that was the last to leave. And she was the sweetest thing. I just loved her to pieces. And anyway, then the next one to surface was a surly teenager with a teenager attitude that I could have done without. And then there were two others, mid-age, different ages, but they had their own identities. They didn't come out as much, but they were definitely distinct. And so over this time, I discerned 4 distinct identities within her that were not her normal Alzheimer's self. And Mary and I had both dealt with and knew people with dissociative identity disorder. So we knew what it was and what to expect. And, well, you don't never know what to expect, but we knew what it was and how it manifested itself. And there's no question in my mind that that's what this was. And it wasn't just some manifestation of her Alzheimer's, thinking she was at different ages.
Yeah.
In fact, she told me one time before that little girl came about, that she told me she thought she was beginning to dissociate because she knew what it was all about. But anyway, so I think that this is totally unique.
Yeah.
The research I could, and I talked to some experts, and I couldn't find anything where there was something like Alzheimer's and dissociative identity disorder together. So we got hit with a double whammy. We got hit with the severe fears and delusions coming on all of a sudden, and then also the dissociation identities. And I got to admit, I never knew who or what I was dealing with a lot of times. But that's not all. She also thought during this time that I had Alzheimer's, not her. So she hardly ever believed anything I told her. And this led to a lot of conflict that we never had before. And she would often accuse me of blackmailing her or kidnapping her. And this also led to safety issues because I would be driving her somewhere in the car and she would start getting on to me, telling me I didn't know where I was going or I didn't know what I was doing or whatever. And then if I didn't change my evil ways in the time frame that she thought I should, she proceeded to unbuckle her seatbelt, open the car door, and try to jump out.
Oh, my.
And this was not an empty threat. She would have jumped. In fact, I start out the book on chapter 1 with the first episode that really caught me by surprise. And I mean, I barely reached over and got her seatbelt in time before she jumped out on that one. I was ready for her the other time. But anyway, so all this together was just horrible. And it all escalated over a 3-month period. At the end of it, 3 months from the time that she had her acute illness. And we were both at a breaking point by the end of that 3 months, and something had to change. And that's when she went into assisted living. We both thought it was going to be just for a short time. Now, we both thought it was going to be a short time for very different reasons. But there I was able to bring in a psychiatrist and a therapist to meet with her and treat her psychiatric issues. And I had them also take over her Alzheimer's medication treatment to make sure everything fit together well. And I mean, there were some rough times and some interesting times that happened in there, but overall, it in the grand scheme of all this time, it didn't last too long, and she settled in pretty quickly, and she liked it there at the assisted living place. But she still declined from an Alzheimer's standpoint. And at the end of, after 8 months, I was called in, and the staff told me that they thought that it was time for her, that she would be better off moving up to the memory care unit. And that was just devastating to me because I was still planning to bring her home at some time. But anyway, it was absolutely the best thing for Mary. She fit in much better there and was much happier because she wasn't able to interact with the normal assisted living people as well. And she's been there now at that facility for 12 years. And she's been happy this whole time. And I attribute her happiness to 3 things. One is the caregivers. She loved the caregivers, and they were exactly what she needed at the different stages. The second thing is that I visited her virtually every day over these 12 years. Now, there were times that I was out of town for work or a funeral or something like that, or, some things would come up or I was sick. So it couldn't be every day, but every day I didn't have a legitimate reason not to. I was there. And I know this increased her happiness because it provided a sense of stability and continuity. Now, I also realize that this is not for everyone by any means, but it's what worked for Mary, and it also ended up working very well for me. And then the third reason that accounts for her happiness over this time, no doubt, is her preparation. Because she's been exactly like she told me she planned to be if Alzheimer's was going to be her fate. And she's just had this inner peace about her that can't be explained any other way. So I think that our journey is positive and encouraging in the sense that it shows you really can make the best out of a bad situation.
Yeah.
And to where the person with Alzheimer's and the loved ones can be as happy as possible. It may take some work, and it may take a little bit different change in your mindset for how you approach things, but it certainly worked for us.
Yeah.
I guess I'll stop there.
Marc, this is just so fascinating. I do have a couple of questions, and there may be questions from the group too. One, so when you did move her into assisted living and you had some psychiatrists and physicians working with her, did they validate your thoughts of, oh, this is dissociative disorder? Did they see that?
Yeah, I mean, they certainly realized that that's what was happening. Whether there's an official diagnosis written somewhere of that, I'm not sure. But they did notice it to some extent.
Sure.
He was put in a different situation when she was talking with them, or that kind of changed the overall atmosphere. But I.
And your sons weren't living with you at the time, so did they ever encounter that with their mother?
I don't think so. No, I don't think they ever really saw that.
Okay. Yeah. Gosh, I just think that's got to be so shocking for you.
It was a shock.
And I also want to say I appreciate you saying that it worked for you and for Mary to have her be in assisted living. I think there are so many different possibilities for how to care for someone. And, there's valid reasons for doing everything. So I know sometimes people want to lean into, well, do everything at home, but that doesn't always work for everyone. And I think that it's finding what's right for you and for your person too.
Well, I certainly planned on keeping her at home, but she was so out in left field at time. There's just no keeping her home. Like I said, I planned on bringing her back if that was possible, but that just didn't work out.
Oh, so I was just I love that how you talk about how she prepared herself. And there's also a lot of thought to, early onset, we're learning more and more about this disease, and we're learning more and more about diagnosing it early and early interventions. But the crux of the matter is if you do find out that you have this predisposition, whether it's a gene trait or something, then you have a decision to make. And it sounds like Mary made the decision, I'm just going to meet this head on and do what I can to have the best life I can. And I think that that's really admirable. I can see how it might be very hard for some folks to think, oh gosh, it's all over now. Now, you can go down into a horrible spiral. It's a lot of things. So this is sort of a testament to the other side of that coin too, of looking at it and being as proactive as you can. And then I guess my question for you, Marc, is how was that for you as a partner to get this, to feel like, oh gosh, Mary is onto something here. Maybe she is having some issues that are bigger than what we thought.
You mean while she was preparing?
Yeah.
She told me about it, like I mentioned to you earlier. But we didn't talk about it a whole lot after that. She just did it.
Okay.
And she would journal every night. She was part of a group where she did assignments every day, and she talked to people every day, and she did some Bible study every day. So it was kind of her thing. And there's sometimes that she wanted me to read something that she wrote, but otherwise I didn't impinge on her space.
Got it.
And it wasn't something that it's not that she thought about it every day about getting Alzheimer's. She made up her mind to do something about it, and she did it.
Yeah. Vicki, did you have a question?
Just a couple questions. Has she had any more instances of the dissociative disorder? Has that continued to be part of who she is over the years?
You mean currently?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Well, first of all, she never had anything before that time I mentioned to you. Probably the last time I saw that little girl was maybe 6 months after she went into assisted living.
Oh, really? Okay.
I mean, the drugs that they gave her are psychotropic drugs meant to get rid of those things, and
Okay. Sure.
but wait, it lasted about that long.
Oh.
But it wasn't as evident, and I think a lot of it, if people didn't know what to look for, they wouldn't have noticed it.
Well, I've done a lot of reading, and I've never come across that in anything I've ever read or talked to people about. I just find it very fascinatingly unusual. I
don't wish it on anyone, so I hope it's totally usual.
Can you specifically say some of the things that she did while she was preparing herself, as you said, in case she got it? What specifically? I mean, you said she wrote, and what other things did she do? Do you remember her doing to prepare herself in case she got Alzheimer's?
Nothing more than what I've already talked about with the writing, and she poured out her thoughts in her writing, and I really let that be her thing. I wanted her to be able to write what she wanted to write without any fear of me reading it or something.
Mm-hmm.
Not that she'd be afraid of that, I don't think, but she needed to have her personal space.
You're being sensitive.
I was trying to be.
Yeah.
It sounds very sensitive. How have your sons, do they see her, and how have they sort of adjusted to, I don't know, your current situation?
Well, they've adjusted to it, and we all have. It's something that eventually you have to recognize, and you eventually come to the point that you know this is what it is. One of the local sons, sees her periodically. The one that lives in Colorado, he sees her most days when he's here. It's something that's accepted now.
Yeah, this many years.
It's tough. I see Malika has her hand raised. So Malika, you want to unmute and go ahead and ask?
Sure. So thank you for sharing your story. I agree. It is very fascinating. I think I like a comment and a question. I noticed like the power of your wife's words, like the things that she would speak. I noticed twice where you said, hey, she spoke something and it kind of, you watched it unfold. Has it always been like that in your relationship where she kind of was intuitive about things even before she got the illness?
Well, yeah, she was pretty intuitive. Sometimes it seemed too much. No, she was, I don't know that changed a lot. I mean, she was always pretty intuitive about, people's thoughts and actions and so forth, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, you answered it. So, and the second question I had is like, I think a question we're probably all thinking, where did you kind of get the energy, the time to say, hey, let me write a book about this?
Well, the writing aspect, I mean, I didn't, like most authors, I think, I did not start out with the intent of writing a book. And I had never journaled. That's not a guy thing, But anyway, once she started having symptoms, I started taking note so I could write down what she was doing and how she was changing, so I could tell the people who were treating her so they could treat her better. And I took a lot of notes during that 3-month period because things were changing so often. And I really didn't, I had to write things down just to keep track of what was going on, and then it would change. But they were, again, like I kind of mentioned before, I didn't know who I was going to be dealing with or what I was going to be dealing with from moment to moment. But then I continued taking note when she went into assisted living and all the way through memory care. In fact, I took some notes last night after I visited her. So it's still going on a little bit. I don't take notes that often now because things aren't changing that much. But it was a positive change, so I thought I wanted to note it. And so then once she went into assisted living, I started looking back over the notes. And a couple of things dawned on me. One was that there were a lot of good points here. I had dealt with a lot of things, and I didn't mind trying different things with her. And so when she had symptoms of Alzheimer's and I tried different things, and I wrote down what worked and didn't work and what I did and didn't work or didn't do. And so like all authors, I think it was something that people could learn from. But then also in looking at it, there were some really interesting things that happened. And it really was a unique story. And so I thought that would be worth telling. And so that's when I started writing a book. I had never written a book before. I had written a lot of publications, articles, reports, protocols, whatever, all this scientific stuff, where you just present the facts, And so that was and I never took a writing course either. So that was where I started on this. And so I came up and started writing it. I came up with a draft of the different things, thinking that, I guess more with this scientific attitude, thinking that it'd be good to kind of stick to the facts and that people wouldn't want to know, all the, personal stuff surrounding it, or, the kind of putting in as few details as possible, to get the point across. Anyway, so then I met this editor, and she's very good, very patient. And I sent her this draft, and she very politely, very professionally barfed all over it. She didn't tell me that, but she didn't say this is the worst thing she's ever read, but she told me, you should think about doing this and, expand this, make a better story here, do this. And she caught some of the just general writing mistakes that I made that you don't want to do. And I got to admit, if I heard show, don't tell from her one more time, I was going to scream. But she was great. And I really appreciate what she did. And we worked together for a good while. And she had lots of good suggestions. And at the end, I came up with my style. My book written the way I want it. It's not necessarily written the way her books are by any means, but it's the way I want it written, and it says what I want it to say, and it's all true. So anyway, that's where the writing aspect came in.
We've all had that episode where someone said, show us, don't tell us. Or I love the way she barfed all over it, maybe metaphorically, but we all have that feeling of, somebody's going to hate it. I absolutely love how you're telling us this too, for those of us who are writers or people who are writing, because it is such a personal story you're telling. And one of the things maybe that we didn't tell people, Marc, is you are an academic, right? You're a scientist. And so, you've you taught college level courses in pharmacology. And so I can see that you would take notes and look at changes, and because this is how your mind works, and it's so helpful. And then on the other hand, it's like, I can see that writer saying, and then you were saying, well, I didn't want to, tell too much about my personal stuff. And the rest of us are thinking, that's exactly what we want to hear. We want to hear about all that.
Well,
Your editor probably gave you that feedback, so that's great. That's wonderful.
the way that the research background helped me is I didn't mind experimenting with things. I didn't mind trying different things with Mary to see what worked. And if something worked, great. I would do it again or expand on it or whatever. Didn't work, fine. You probably wouldn't remember it the next day. So it was worth trying a lot of different things.
Sure.
A good researcher. You are a good researcher.
Yeah. So Vicki, did you have something else?
Well, it's totally unrelated. I just popped in my head. Is the picture of her jumping is that her? Is that her on the cover of your book?
So there's two versions of the book.
Well, the second one.
Okay. But just to show real quick, this is the first version that I did through a publisher and got totally screwed by the publisher. But anyway, then I got out of that. And this is the new one. That's Mary.
That is her.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's a wonderful picture. A wonderful picture. I like your second cover a lot.
Yeah.
The first one was good, but the second one. Yeah.
And we do have a question. Thank you, Vicki. We do have a question from Dor. So Dor, if you want to unmute and ask your question, that's great.
Yeah, I loved the book. Thank you so much. I loved all the details about your relationship. My question was, you had said Mary had some family members with Alzheimer's, but did you have much prior experience or knowledge of Alzheimer's? That's question one. And question two is something I've been grappling with, and others can answer, is if you didn't, would reading your book, like if you weren't you and you were, you're not someone else who's just beginning the journey of Alzheimer's, would you find that helpful or scary? Do you know what I mean? I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on, those things.
Okay. Well, with respect to the previous experience, I mean, most of my career I spent working with different pharmaceutical companies, designing and setting up and managing clinical drug trials. And this is over many indications, but a couple of these trials were with Alzheimer's patients and testing for a new potential Alzheimer's drug. And so I learned a lot about Alzheimer's there because I would see the way I never saw the patients themselves, but I would see how they answered questions on the test and how this progressed over time and some of the comments they made. So going into this, I had, I think, a much better knowledge of what to expect in early Alzheimer's than the average person. And that really helped during that time. Now, I must admit, during those horrible 3 months, it did me no good. But I think the second part of your question is that, if you go to any Alzheimer's website, or almost any, you see a list of about 10 common symptoms of the early stage of Alzheimer's. And I think it'd be good for everyone to know these. I belong to a Alzheimer's support group for 14 years, and I've seen a lot of people come and go. And I've seen some people come in and a loved one was just recently diagnosed and they had a total deer in the headlights look about them. And they had no idea what to do, what was going on, what to expect. And I think that if these people just knew and understood to some degree those common symptoms of Alzheimer's, it would be great. Now, and reading a book or any of these memoir, tells a lot about what can happen. I also think, just carrying it one step further, I personally think that virtually everyone is going to have to deal with Alzheimer's in one way or another, whether they are some other dementia, whether they get the disease or their caregiver or other loved one or friend or just someone who should acknowledge and deal with the person with Alzheimer's. And I think it'd be good for everyone to know those common symptoms and so forth, because it's scary. And even if it's not someone you know a lot, it's scary to deal with someone who's got Alzheimer's. You don't know what to say to them, and therefore you usually don't say anything. And it's a very lonely disease, not only for the patient who has it, but for the loved one, who are with them, the caregivers. And people shy away from them. And I think I visit these people in memory care and assisted living every day. And I talk with them every day. And they love to have people to talk with. Yet I think a lot of times they're shunned. People don't want to go visit these people. And I think the more people know, I think the better it will be for everyone. And I think it's just going to get more common as the aging population increases and people live longer and all these sorts of things. So whatever can be done and to get the word out about what to expect and how to deal with these people is better. And even though I talk about a few instances with some of the people in memory care, for example, hopefully the book takes some of the scariness out of visiting these people.
I really appreciated you sharing about the residents, that chapter on the residents, and just people's reactions to them and not wanting to talk to them, and how you make an effort to say hello. I thought that was beautiful and wonderful, and I just really appreciated that. And thank you for your comments. I think you're exactly right. That's why I'm reading all these books and just trying to become more knowledgeable and encouraging others to do that. So thank you. Thank you for the time that you put in to write that. It's very, very encouraging.
Well, it was good for me to write the book too.
I bet. Yeah.
Marc, I wanted to ask, so many things here are coming to my mind. Now, Mary would have been in assisted living or memory care by this point while we were all going through the pandemic lockdown part. How did you manage that?
Not very well. But the book stopped shortly before COVID hit. So it doesn't cover COVID. I had to get the book into the publisher in a final format sometime in 2020. And the first edition came out in December of 21. But I was going to see Mary every day, and that she was really benefiting from that. And then COVID hit, and I could not go be with her physically for a little over a year. And I had been walking her every day. It was slow. I'd been walking her every day, and we still had really good times together, and she still smiled a lot. By the time I could go back and be with her physically, she was totally in a wheelchair, and she didn't smile anymore. And very difficult. She really went downhill during that year. But I've really brought her back quite a bit. She doesn't walk at all now, but she's become more interactive. When I first saw her after the COVID, she was just kind of, slumped down and just, your typical Alzheimer's person that wasn't going to make it very long. But in going back and see her every day, in fact, I mentioned I even took a note last night, and it was because over the past few days or week, I started seeing smiles again after all this time. Now, they're not quite like they were before, but I know they're smiles, and they're in context with when she's looking at me, or she'll put her hand out towards my face or something like that. So there's a lot that these people who you think don't understand anything it's amazing what they can still understand. Now, we haven't had a conversation for at least 8 years. I mean, it's been all nonverbal. But the nonverbal part has been much better than anything that could be done verbally at this stage. So
I did remember that from the book. That's very touching. And so thank you for sharing that. I know it was just such a horrific time for so many folks, and it had to have just been so hard on you personally. And so I did, because we have you here and you're a husband talking about caring for your wife, and we don't often have men as caregivers talking with us. Can you share a little bit about what would you say to other men who are caregivers? What would you talked about mindset. Is there something you would share with other husbands or brothers or siblings, just other men caring for other people?
Well, I mean, first of all, with the memoirs I've read, I must admit it, I've identified more with one that was written by a man, just because I could picture myself in that scene. You know, if it's hard to say, because let me put it this way: if we were back in the 1950s, it'd be much easier to answer that question, because there was a more defined role between the men and the women of the family. Okay. Nowadays, it's much different in most cases. Now, Mary's and my relationship was more like the 50s. But, I mean, now you could have, two people, two spouses or two partners, and there's all sorts of arrangements now. It's not necessarily a husband and wife. And, both of them could have a career of their own, regardless of what was done with the kid. Yeah. If there were any. And so, yeah, I think there might not be as much difference now as there was at one time. And I don't know if that's good or bad.
Well, I appreciate you.
But about the male and female, I think it's good to have both views. And as you know, most memoirs, I don't know, 80%, 90% are written by women. Mm-hmm. And they're usually the caregiver. Certainly if the mother or father, that's really what happened. Now, if you're a husband or wife, you don't have a choice, If you have your spouse who has Alzheimer's. And I think generally women are more nurturing, shall we say, and more apt to write. I mean, I've never known a man that kept a journal, or one that admitted to it. But so I don't know. I've heard of a lot of women who have. And so I think the writing was just a natural thing to go into, to write a memoir.
That's great. I know Roseanne had a question.
Thanks. My husband's mom had Alzheimer's and my mom had Alzheimer's. And although he does have sisters, because of the location of the assisted living facility where his mom was, he took on the yeoman share of things. My mom lived with us. And his mom made it to almost 100. Sometimes she knew him as her son. Sometimes she thought he was her late husband. But she knew he was sort of like a friendly face. And my mom pretty much always knew it was me. Before COVID hit, did your wife know that you were her husband, or just sort of a nice guy to visit with her?
I like to think she understood the husband thing, but I mean, she couldn't think about it if she wanted to. So, and I thought about that, and really it didn't make a bit of difference to me whether she thought I was her husband or I was just some nice guy who came to visit her every day. It made her happy. Mm-hmm. Now, I think, I mean, she knew that I was a person she loved. Mm. So and she still does.
My gosh, I feel like I'm watching The Notebook. This is so wonderful. You know that movie? But it's beautiful, and I love that. You and I talked a little bit at the beginning before everyone joined us, and you talked a little bit about mindset. Can you talk a little bit about what that means to you and what you would share with others around that?
Well, I had to develop a different mindset, where it's a different approach to how I thought about things. And it would vary from person to person. I mean, what worked for me wouldn't work for someone else. But for me, it was really a component of two things. One was attitude, and the other one was expectations. I mean, there were times that I really got down and I was depressed. I mean, not a pathological depression, but certainly a situational depression. And, kind of negative and, all the things that I was dealing with work and home and Mary and all this sort of stuff. And if I went in to visit Mary in a down spirit, she picked up on it like that.
Mm-hmm.
She was down there right with me. And neither one of us had a good visit when that happened. So I consciously started making sure I went in with a positive, upbeat attitude. Now, sometimes I had to leave my work situation or what I had to do later on that evening, at the door. But I started going in with a positive attitude, and eventually I didn't have to think about it. It was just came natural. But this made a big difference, because when I was positive, she was positive, and she was happy. And when she was happy, I was happy. So it was a mutual type of thing. But also, I had to change my expectations. I finally realized she wasn't going to get all better and come home, and there was no way I could bring her back home again. And so, even though it may sound negative, when I really realized that she was not going to get any better, she was going to have to stay there, and, nothing from our previous lives was going to ever happen again. That was actually a freeing moment, because I didn't worry about it. And so I just accepted each day as it came. And it was much easier to have a positive attitude because of that.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Marc, was there anything else that you would like to share in particular? I know you were saying you don't know any men who journal, and that might be changing. I think men starting to do some note-taking and to kind of look at things and to journal a little bit. But even just taking some time to think about self-care, like even men think like, how do I take care of myself? And so maybe you could share a little bit about what you do to help you, get ready to be that positive person going in to see Mary. And what are the things you do to nurture yourself?
Well, not a lot. I worked with someone for about a year. I won't say a therapist, because real men don't ask direction. But it was a social worker through my insurance company. And they called about once a year to talk with Mary initially, to see if there were things that needed to be talked out from a mental health status. I'm sure they felt that if they could catch something early on, it wouldn't go to something more significant. And they called, and, I told them Mary couldn't talk to them. And they asked me if I wanted to talk with someone. And for a few years I said, no, I'm fine. I don't need any help. But anyway, then finally I did talk with someone, and she was very, very good, very helpful. And I didn't mind dumping on her, with various things that were bothering me, whether work or the dog I didn't want, or long-term finances, or whatever. And Mary's situation, and it wouldn't do any good to dump this on my sons because they couldn't do anything about it. So I didn't mind opening up with her. And then finally she asked me, what do you do for fun? And there was a long silence. I really couldn't answer her. And she convinced me to go out a few times and do something just for myself, not go visit Mary. And so I did this a couple of times. And I didn't tell her, but one of the times I went to see Mary first. But I did go out a couple of times, but it was by myself, and it was to some music cafe or something like that. And it was fine, but it wasn't an answer. But to get back to your question, it made me realize that I really did enjoy going to see Mary. And it was good for both of us. And so I didn't really approach it as a total obligation before that time, but I certainly didn't approach it as an obligation that I didn't want to do after that time. So that kind of opened up my mind a little bit.
Sure. Well, and you referenced a support group. So are you involved in a Alzheimer's spousal or partner support group?
Yeah, we meet it. I mean, some of them have their mothers or fathers, but
Sure.
yeah, we're still meeting by Zoom. We used to meet where Mary is now. Then COVID hit, and we're still meeting by Zoom, and it's every 2 weeks.
Yeah. And looks like Dora has a question, and then we'll probably start to wrap up.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you have any suggestions about how you do communicate with Mary now that she's nonverbal. You said, I have a sister who has primary progressive aphasia, so communication is becoming more difficult. So I was just wondering if you have, it seems you've worked so hard at it, and I'm wondering if you have some suggestions for that.
Well, it might be different between a spouse like I have and a sister like you're talking about. With Mary, it was just all lovey stuff, you know, whether it was looking at each other's eyes or smiling or holding hands or me, caressing her cheek or something like that. It was all physical, and it was much better. I mean, it was kind of at a primal level, but it was much better than anything that we could try to talk about, because neither one of us would have probably understood each other. And if we did think we understood each other, it would probably be wrong. So we'd make a mistake or something. So for us, it worked out very well. And I don't know that answered your question, but it was just, touch and looking at them. And we walked around a lot, things like this. And it was some singing and humming and that type of thing.
And does it reference what you're talking about here? Makes me think of your title, Don't Forget to Dance. Was that something, do you want to tell us about that briefly?
Well, Mary always liked to dance, and I didn't, and I wasn't good at it. And as throughout our married life, we would go to various social functions that had dancing. And I would do my few token flow dances with her. I'm sure not as much as she wanted. And I've regretted that. But I got a do-over, because virtually every day since she's been in assisted living and all the way through memory care, we've danced in some way or another. It's not, it may not look like dancing now, but it's something that's more of a rhythmical communication that we do. And so that's where the title came from. But I also think that the title applies to everyone, because don't forget to dance, whatever dancing is in your life, before something drastic happens to you, like an Alzheimer's diagnosis or cancer or heart attack or something like that. And we never know when that's going to happen. So before something happens, follow your passions, do the things you love, make great friends and relationships that will last a long time. But then also, after something drastic happens, like an Alzheimer's diagnosis, don't forget to dance there. And Mary didn't, by all the things that she started doing after she was diagnosed. That's not the time to give up. So it kind of has implications. It had personal implications for me when I came up with the title, but I think it reaches far beyond that too.
Marc, that is so beautiful. I just think that's so wonderful, and I love that so much. I wish we could talk forever, but we do need to wrap up. I like the Don't Forget to Dance, and trust me, I'll be sharing that with my husbands. But I want to thank everybody for coming. And so, Marc, thank you for joining us. As I said, this episode will be posted on July 17th.
On July 30th, join us when our Books and Chit Chat author will be our very own Marianne Shuko and her book, Blue Hydrangeas, an Alzheimer's Love Story.
So for all of you who are watching or listening to this later, you can learn more and register for the next Al's Authors and Books and Chit Chat at alsauthors.com or in the Aging and Amazing Community and Books and Chit Chat channel. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and like and subscribe on our YouTube channel, which you can find also a link to that on our website. And lastly, I just want to say you are not alone. One can sing a lonely song, but we chose to form a choir and create harmony. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia, an Al's Authors podcast. For more details on this episode, please see the show notes. If you enjoyed the podcast, please leave a review and subscribe to it on whichever platform you use to listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information on Al's Authors, please visit alsauthors.com. While you're there, be sure to browse our online bookstore, where you will find hundreds of carefully vetted books on Alzheimer's and dementia. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Please email your thoughts on the podcast to allsauthors@gmail.com. We are a 501c3 charitable organization, totally reliant on donations to do what we do. If our authors' stories move you, please consider contributing to our cause. Remember, you are not alone. One can sing a lonely song, but we chose to form a choir and create harmony. Hi, it's Marianne with exciting news. Al's Authors has published a brand new anthology, Poetry for the Dementia Journey, now available in ebook and paperback through Amazon. Within its pages, you'll discover a variety of voices writing about the diversity of dementia care experiences, caring for a mother or father or spouse, witnessing the decline of a sibling, reflections on the time before the diagnosis, the years of care, and the aftermath. Poetry provides us with a meaningful way to explore our experience and emotions regarding dementia and to express ourselves when we encounter the many different joys and dilemmas caregiving can bring. You'll find details on how to order the book in the show notes. Please remember to leave a review on the book sales page once you've read it. Reviews do help boost a book's visibility and helps readers find it. Thank you for your support of our efforts to erase the silence and stigma that often accompany a dementia diagnosis.
Caregiving is a challenge, whether your person has dementia or not. Finding helpful tips and learning new strategies from people in the know is critical. That's why we at Al's Authors love the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast from Elizabeth Miller, who also happens to be an Al's author. Elizabeth speaks from experience and has important and often fun conversations with other caregiving experts and professionals. And we appreciate learning tips on self-care, discovering new resources, and feeling empowered to support ourselves as caregivers. You can find the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast wherever you download your favorite podcasts, or visit the website happyhealthycaregiver.com.